Today, we're going to be talking about verse 36 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu. But before I start to discuss verse 36, I'd like to go back to the verse we discussed last time, verse 35, because after watching the video, someone pointed out to me that I had inadvertently skipped one of the sentences, the fourth sentence in the previous verse. So I'll just quickly go over the verse again to, in order to cover that fourth sentence. What Bhagavan says, so this is verse 35, the same verse that we dealt with last time. What Bhagavan is talking about in this verse is siddhi, which is a word that means accomplishment. In some context, it refers specifically to yogis sometimes tried by various practices, meditation and so on, to acquire supernatural powers. So in certain contexts, siddhi means supernatural powers, so that's indirectly referred to here, but siddhi more generally means accomplishment, so it can mean any type of accomplishment. And what Bhagavan says in the first sentence is, being, knowing the substance, which exists as accomplished, is accomplishment. So the implication of this sentence is that being as we actually are, knowing the one real substance, which is ourself, which exists as siddham. Siddham means what is accomplished, and implication is what is always accomplished, is real siddhi, real accomplishment. So Bhagavan said the only real accomplishment is to know and to be as we actually are. In the second sentence, he says, "Pira siddhi ellam sopnamra siddhigale." All other accomplishments are just accomplishments achieved in a dream. Whatever we may achieve in a dream is not real. It's of no value. It may seem to have value so long as we're dreaming, but when we wake up, it's obvious to us that it's unreal. In the third sentence, he says, "Nidre vitu uḍal abe meyo." If one wakes up from leaving sleep, are they real? So whatever we may achieve in a dream is unreal when we wake up. So Bhagavan said any accomplishment other than just knowing and being what we actually are is as unreal as anything we may accomplish in a dream. And then the fourth sentence, which is one I didn't discuss last time, somehow I skipped over it, is uṇmeṇ-nīlae-niṇḍṛu poime tienda tiaṅguvaro. That means, will those who, standing in the real state, have left unreality be deluded? The real state is the state of knowing and being what we actually are. That is our natural state, our real state. It's the state we are always actually in, but it's the state that is seemingly obscured when we rise as ego. It is not obscured. Our real nature is always aware of itself as it actually is. But when we seemingly rise as ego, we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are. So, because we've risen as ego, we're not aware of ourselves as we actually are, so we mistake ourselves to be a body, and we consequently aware of the world. So the root of all unreality is our rising as ego. So when Bhagavan says, uṇmeṇ-nīlae-niṇḍṛu, standing in the real state, poime tienda, those who have left unreality. Poi means what is unreal. Poime is the quality of being unreal. So those who have left unreality, tiaṅguvaro, will they be deluded? The implication here is that if we remain in our real state and thereby leave behind this unreal state, we will no longer be deluded by any accomplishment other than the accomplishment of just knowing and being what we actually are. So delusion arises only so long as we fail to abide in our real state. When we don't abide in our real state because we've risen as ego. When ego is unreal and all its creations are unreal. So everything we as ego experience is unreal, except the only element of reality in all that we experience is our own self-awareness. I am. That alone is real. Everything else is unreal. So whatever we may achieve other than knowing and being what we actually are is unreal. It's no more real than anything that we may achieve in a dream. So if we wake up from a dream, leave behind that state of unreality dream, and remain in our real state, we will not be deluded by anything. And then he concludes the verse saying "ter," which means no. So I just wanted to repeat that, just to cover that fourth sentence, which I somehow inadvertently skipped over last time. So now coming to this present verse, as I said, he talks about sorry, I'll just check again. There he spoke about tuṇai-y-ē. That means standing. Literally, niṛkum means to stand or to be still or to halt in the real state. So tuṇai-y-ē, standing in the real state. He said that in the fourth sentence that I've just discussed. Standing in our real state, leaving behind what is unreal, will we be deluded? So standing in our real state is what standing in our real state means knowing and being what we actually are. That is what he is talking about in verse 36. What he says in the first sentence of this verse is nāmuḍaleṉ. That means if we think that we have a body, ṇāṇmaṇida, eṇṇum, nāmaduvā niṛpadaṛku, naṭṛuṇaiyē. That means if we think that we are a body, thinking, no, we are that, will be a good aid for us to stand as that. What that implies is, so long as we are aware of ourselves as a body, it may be an aid for us to think, no, we are not this body, we are that. That refers to Brahman. What Bhagavan referred to in the previous verse as paral, the real substance. That means pure awareness, what we actually are. So if thinking, no, we are not this body, we are that, it will be a good aid for us to stand as that. What Bhagavan means by saying it's a good aid, or just a good aid, tuṇai-y-ē, the A is a stress, which in this context implies just. It's just a good aid. How is it a good aid? Because by thinking, no, we are not this body, we are that, that can help to remind us and encourage us to stand firmly as that. But our aim should be not to be thinking this or that, to be just standing firmly as that. So long as we're thinking, we are not this body, we are that, we are not firmly standing as that. As Bhagavan said in verse 27, he said, the state in which one exists without I rising is the state in which we exist as that. So if we want to abide as that, if we want to be as we actually are, we have to cease rising as ego. And so long as we're thinking, I am not this body, I am that, who is thinking that? It's only ego. So ego needs to give up thinking anything at all. In other words, we need to withdraw our attention from all other things and focusing only on ourselves then only we can be in a state in which I does not rise. Because as he says, continuing in verse 27, he says, without investigating the place where I rises, how to reach the annihilation of oneself in which I does not rise. And without reaching that state, how to stand in the state of oneself in which one is that. So the only way to abide in the state, or to stand in the state in which we are that, is to annihilate ego. And the only way to annihilate ego is to investigate from where we have risen as ego. From where have we risen as ego? Only from what we actually are, from our real nature, from pure awareness. So in this sentence, he's saying that he makes a concession. He says thinking like that may be a good aid, but it's only a good aid for reminding us and encouraging us to stand as that. He used this same word aid, tuṇai, in another verse, verse 29. I think he used the word tuṇai. It certainly is a word, but they say, I'll just go back to 29 and check. Yes, he used the same word tuṇai in verse 29. In verse 29, he says, not saying I by mouth, investigating with an inward sinking mind where one rises as I is the path of knowledge. Instead, thinking not this, I am that. That implies I am not this, I am that. I am not this body, I am that Brahman, is an aid. Is it investigation? So the true investigation is when the mind turns within and attends to itself alone. When we attend to ourself alone, that alone is the state of investigation. Thinking I'm not this body, I am that Brahman, may help to remind us and encourage us to turn our attention within, but it is not itself the investigation that is required. So in this verse 36, Bhagavan says that it's but thinking is, so long as we think that we are a body, thinking no, we are not this body, we are that, will be a good aid for reminding and encouraging us to stand as that. He doesn't actually say reminding and encouraging, but that's what we have to infer here. In the Kalivemba version of this verse, Bhagavan extended this first sentence by adding before it an adverbial clause, kondu-mayal, in which mayal means confusion, bewilderment, delusion, madness, desire, or maya, and kondu means being abundant, excessive, sharp, keen, or acute. So kondu-mayal, or as it would be normally said in Tamil prose, mayal kondu, literally means confusion being excessive, or being abundant. So in other words, having abundant or intense delusion. Therefore, with this Kalivemba extension, this first sentence is kondu-mayal nāmuḍaleṉ. That means if we think that we are a body, well, it literally means if confusion being excessive, if we think we are a body. So what that implies is if we think that we are a body because of our confusion or delusion being excessive, thinking, so I'll read the whole sentence again. Kondu-mayal nāmuḍaleṉ allam nāmaduvā eṇṇumadu nāmaduvā niṛpadaṛku naṭṛuṇaiyē. So if confusion being excessive, if we think we are a body, thinking no, we are that, will be a good aid for us to stand as that. That implies if we think that we are a body because of our confusion or delusion being excessive, thinking no, we are not this body, we are that Brahman, will be a good aid for reminding and encouraging us to stand as that. Then in the next sentence he says, eṇṇrum nāmaduvā eṇḍṛu eṇṇuvadu eṇ. Why always thinking we are that? That's simply a question. And in the next sentence, in other words, why always thinking means why should we always be thinking we are that? ṇāṇmaṇidaṉ eṇḍṛu eṇnumō. Does one think I am a man? That the implication of that sentence is, does one need to be always thinking I am a man in order to be aware of oneself as a man? Man here, maṉidaṉ, is not gender specific, so it means a person, a human being. So in order to think of ourselves as a human being, do we constantly need to be thinking I am human, I am human, I am not a dog, I am a human being? It's not necessary. We're aware of ourselves as a human being, so we don't have to continually be thinking of ourselves as a human being. And then the last sentence is actually, it's not a complete sentence, it's a clause. So it's connecting with it's actually connecting with the previous but one sentence. Nāmaduvā niṛkum, adaṉāl. Since we stand as that. So if we connect these three sentences together, it would read, since we stand as that, why should we always be thinking we are that? The word that Bhagavan uses here for eṇḍrum for always, is eṇḍrum. It happens to come immediately before the clause, nāmaduvā eṇḍṛu eṇnuvadu eṇ. Why thinking we are that? Why to think we are that? So it's generally interpreted as why should we always be thinking we are that? But because in Tamil often, for poetic reasons, the words are not in an order that is not the natural prose order. So often to interpret a Tamil verse, the order of the words need to be shifted around. That's called doing anvayam. It seems to me that it's more meaningful to take the eṇḍrum with the final clause, nāmaduvā niṛkum adaṉāl. So eṇḍrum nāmaduvā niṛkum adaṉāl means since we always stand as that. So that is, since we are always Brahman, we are always nothing other than that, why should we be thinking we are that? So I think the stress is better if the eṇḍrum is connected with that clause. So in which case, if you arrange it into a natural prose order, it would be eṇḍrum nāmaduvā niṛkum adaṉāl. Since we always stand as that, nāmaduvā eṇḍṛu eṇnuvadu eṇ. Why should we be thinking we are that? So the implication of this verse is that instead of what Bhagavan expects us to do is to abide as that, to be what we actually are. So the implication of this verse is, instead of just thinking, I am not this body, I am that, we should look keenly at ourselves to see what we actually are. Because only when we see what we actually are, will we see that we always stand firmly as that. So long as we are attending to anything other than ourselves, we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are. In order to be aware of us, that we are always that, we need to be aware of what we actually are. In order to be aware of what we actually are, we need to attend to ourselves. So though at the early stages of practice, thinking I am not this body, I am that, may help to remind us and encourage us to try to be that. In other words, to try to attend to ourselves. Because the only way to be what we actually are is to know what we actually are. So long as we know ourselves as I am this person, we are not being what we actually are. We are mistaking ourselves to be this person. Only when we know ourselves as we actually are can we be aware of ourselves. I mean, will we be aware, but we are always as we actually are. So we need to look keenly at ourselves. We need to investigate ourselves very keenly in order to see what we actually are, because only when we see what we actually are will we see that we always firmly abide as that. We always firmly stand as that. This is the implication of this verse. This, as I say, I've already connected it with two earlier verses. Verse 27, in which Bhagavan defines the state of abiding as that, as being the state in which we don't rise as I. The state in which one exists without rising, without I rising, is the state in which we exist as that. And in order to be in that state in which I doesn't rise, we need to annihilate ego. And in order to annihilate ego, we need to investigate the place where ego rises. That's the implication of, that's what Bhagavan teaches in verse 27. In verse 29, he teaches us what the real path of jnana is. The real path of jnana is not saying I by mouth. That means not even, though he literally says by mouth, the implication is not even thinking the word I, but just inwardly investigating where do I rise as I? Or from where do I rise as I? In other words, turning our attention back towards ourselves, the source from which we've risen as ego, that alone is the path of knowledge. Instead of investigating ourselves thus, thinking I'm not this, I'm that, is an aid, but it's not the actual investigation. So at the early stages, it may be a preliminary aid, but it's because the reason Bhagavan referred to this indirectly referred to this in 4 verses, many people in the past, or even nowadays, not only in the past, even after Bhagavan, many people are still under this wrong impression. But the way to experience ourselves as Brahman is to be constantly meditating. I am not this body, I am Brahman. Bhagavan said that's a mere aid. That helps us to encourage us to turn within. It reminds us to turn within and encourages us to turn within. But it's not the actual practice that is required. The actual practice that is required is to turn our mind within. This is also emphasized by him very strongly in verse 32. In verse 32, what he says is, when the Vedas proclaim that is you, instead of oneself knowing oneself as what, thinking I am that, not this, is due to non-existence of strength, because that alone is always seated as oneself. The first part, it's all one sentence in verse 32. The first part of the sentence, first 2 clauses, when the Vedas proclaim that is you, instead of oneself knowing oneself as what, that as what, the implication there is, when the Vedas say you are that, our immediate response should be, oh, I'm that, then what am I? Why do the Vedas say you are that? Because till now, till we are told by the Vedas, or the sages like Bhagavan, but we are what we are seeking. We are seeking happiness or God or whatever we want to call it. We are seeking that outside ourselves. We feel ourselves to be very small and insignificant, whereas God is very great. So we are seeking God. We take God to be something other than ourselves. But so long as we are looking for God outside ourselves, our attention is turned away from ourselves towards whatever idea we have of God. That idea of God is not what God actually is. What God actually is ourself. That is, what we actually are is God. So the Vedas say you are that. When they say you are that, what they imply, what we should understand when they say you are that is, oh, if I am that, I don't have to continue thinking about God. I need to think about myself. That is, instead of turning my attention outwards to some idea of God, I need to turn my attention within, because what God actually is only myself. So in order to know God, I need to know what am I. So Bhagavan says, instead of oneself knowing oneself, oneself being knowing oneself. Bhagavan often brings being and knowing together because, as he says in Upadeshundi, I think verse 26, I think it is, tuṇai-y-ē tanne aridalam. Knowing oneself is being oneself, or being oneself is knowing oneself. So knowing and being are one and the same thing. According to Bhagavan, existence, there is no existence other than awareness. This whole world, for example, seems to exist because we're aware of it. When we're not aware of it, we've got no evidence that it exists. So, and our own existence, what we actually are, is only awareness. So there is no such thing as existence apart from awareness. So Bhagavan often brings this being and knowing together because they're actually one and the same thing. So how to be ourselves, how to be what we actually are, we have to know what we actually are. Until we know what we actually are, well, we are always what we actually are, but so long as we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are, we seem to be something other than what we actually are. So he says, instead of oneself being, knowing oneself as what? That is, as what here means by investigating what am I. So when the Vedas say you are that, our immediate response should be to investigate what am I. But instead of investigating what am I, if we merely think I am that, not this, that is, I am that Brahman, not this body, that is due to, well, Bhagavan says, Uran in me inal. Uran means strength. In me means, literally means non-existence. So the implication is it is due to a lack of deficiency of strength. What is that strength? That strength is the strength of clarity of understanding. If we investigate if we repeat I am that instead of investigating what am I, we haven't correctly understood what the true import of what the true aim of the Mahavakya Tattvamasi, you are that. There are some scholars of Advaita who say it is not sufficient merely to investigate the meaning of the word tvum, you also have to investigate the meaning of the word tat. In other words, you shouldn't only investigate yourself, you also need to investigate that. Any scholar who says that has completely failed to understand the meaning of the Mahavakya. The Mahavakya is Tattvamasi, you, that is you. There is no that other than you. So if you know yourself, you know that. But the mind likes to complicate things. So, and many people don't want to give up ego. So so long as we don't want to give up ego, we will try to complicate things. We'll try and understand things in a distorted way in order to avoid facing up to what is actually required. What is actually required is that we turn within and face ourselves alone, attend to ourselves alone. That is all that is required. So, as I say, in this verse 32, what Bhagavan implies is, when the Vedas say you are that, what is expected of us is that we should know us, we should be what we actually are by knowing ourselves, by investigating what am I. Instead of that, if we just think I am that, not this, that's due to lack of strength, because that is Brahman alone is always seated as oneself. So that's the meaning of 32. So here in verse 36, he is emphasizing the same thing. Thinking, no, we are that. It may be good aid so long as we continue to be under the wrong impression that we are a body. for once we clearly understand what Bhagavan has taught us, why we cannot be this body. Body is something that appears and disappears, but we exist and are aware of our existence, whether we're aware of this body or not. In dream, we're not aware of this body. We're aware of some other body as if it were ourselves, but we exist in both states. So we cannot be either of these bodies. And in dream, in sleep, in deep sleep, we are aware of ourselves without being aware of any body whatsoever. So no body can be ourselves. In fact, we're not, in sleep, we are not aware of any phenomenon at all. So no phenomena can be what we actually are. What we actually are is just awareness. So if we think we're a body, thinking that we are that, it will be a good aid for us to stand as that. But since we always stand as that, why should we be thinking we are that? Does one have to think I am a man? We know very well we are human. We don't have to be constantly thinking I am human, I am human. We're not in danger of mistaking ourselves to be a dog or a horse or an ant or a table or a chair. We know very well we are human. But that is our present experience is I am human. So we don't have to be constantly thinking I am human in order to be aware of ourselves. I am human, but we are human. Likewise, we don't need to be constantly thinking I am Brahman in order to be aware of ourselves as Brahman. In order to be aware of ourselves as Brahman, what do we have to do? We have to turn our attention back and keenly look at ourselves to see what we actually are. That is all that is required. So throughout Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, Bhagavan is constantly emphasizing that the only way to be aware of ourselves as we actually are is to get rid of ego. And the only way to get rid of ego is to see what we actually are. So we have to turn our attention within, see what we actually are, thereby destroy the ego, and thereby we'll be aware that we are always that. We are never anything other than that. That means here Brahman, or the pure awareness. So I think this time I didn't skip any sentences. I think I've covered everything. Oh yeah, I'll just to recap. So why should we always be thinking that we are that? Yeah, I've covered all that. Yeah, because we always are that. Since we always exist as that, why should we be thinking we are that? So if anyone has any questions about this or anything else.
So this basically is talking about practice here, how not to do it. So just thinking I am Brahman or I am that. Just focus on your awareness. Just be your awareness.
Yes. Not I am that. What am I? That is what is required.
Right.
I just want to share my own experience. As you mentioned, I totally agree with you in the sense that we need to repeat I'm that, I'm not this, until we get into a state of nididhyasana, so to speak, until we get, it becomes part of the life. But my own experience, at least to share with you and the other audience, is when I'm in I would say probably in a distress state, for example, by repeating, for example, I have tried repeating the prayer we practice here in the center, repeatedly, just like japa, until I get a relief from that distress state. It has helped me to overcome that, transcend that distress state. So I think until we realize and becomes part of it, it becomes a natural reaction. Probably it's not a wrong thing to practice. I am that, I am not this body, I am awareness, I am consciousness, and whatever else adjective you might use to describe. So japa, in a sense, has a place in the process of maturing in this path, or continuing in this path. The second thing is always the question, I am Brahman. We theoretically, hypothetically we agree with that concept. But in real life, we are not limitless, we are not all pervasive, and we don't have all the other qualities of Ishvara. So unless we bring Maya into conversation, we have difficulty to realize or completely can get convinced that I am Brahman, I am limitless, I am all-pervasive, I am God in a sense. So I think there are practical implications about the role of thinking that I am that repeatedly until it becomes a part of our life.
Yes, well, there are two things I'd like to say in connection with that. That is, our present experience of ourself is I am a person. I am Michael or whoever. If I start thinking I am Brahman, so long as I mistake myself to be Michael, and I think I am Brahman, in effect I'm thinking Michael is Brahman, which is completely wrong. First, we need to, when the Upanishads teach us, neti, you're not this body, you're not this mind, you're not all these things, you are that. When they teach that, their aim is not for us just to do japa of it, because I can do japa of anything. I can do japa of Mount Everest is a tall mountain, Mount Everest is a tall mountain, Mount Everest is a tall mountain. What's the use of that? I need to go and see Mount Everest and see how tall it is. It's the philosophy is merely learning philosophy like a formula is not true philosophy. Philosophy is about having an inquiring mind, questioning everything. So we now, it is our present experience is I am this body. That's our actual experience now. I am sitting here, you are sitting there, you are listening, I am talking. All this identification with the body is so strong. That is our actual experience. But though it is our actual experience, if we use our power of judgment and consider carefully, now this body seems to be myself. But in dream, I'm not aware of this body. I'm aware of, I'm still aware of myself, but I'm aware of myself as some other body. So we need to, this is what is called manana. Manana is misunderstood as mere repetition. It's not repetition. It is thinking deeply to understand the reasons. Why is it said, I am not this body? Why is it said, I'm not this mind? Why is it said, I'm not this, any of these 5 sheaths? We need to think it out for ourselves and understand for ourselves why it is so. Once we have understood that we are, though we seem to be this body, that is not what we actually are. Once we've understood that, that task is achieved. We don't have to continue thinking I'm not this body. Why we first need to be told that we are not this body, mind, or anything. So long, because our experience is that we are this person, if we are told to attend to ourselves, I can go and, if I take myself to be this body, I can go and sit in a mirror and look at my face in the mirror and think I'm attending to myself. That is not what is meant by attending to ourselves. This body is not what I actually am. What am I? I am just awareness. So in order to investigate myself, I have to withdraw my attention from all phenomena and fix it on myself, the awareness that is aware of all phenomena. So the teaching of neti is to give us a conviction. That conviction is achieved not by merely repeating, I am not this body, I am not this mind. By repeating that like a parrot, that doesn't give us the conviction. The conviction comes by thinking deeply about it, thinking the reasons why. Why is it said I'm not this body? Why is it said I'm not this mind? If we don't think deeply like that, it just becomes a formula. It's just like in religion, they say we're taught certain beliefs in religion. We're taught God is great. I mean, every religion has its own doctrines. And in order to be a religious believer, you have to take on board all those beliefs and accept them. But that's very, very superficial. We need to have a deep and clear understanding. Why am I not this body? Why am I not this mind? Why am I not this intellect? Why am I not this chittam, this will, this anandamaya kosha, the will, the desires and the fears and everything? I'm not any of these things. These are things that come and go. I remain, whether I have desire or fear, or no desire or fear. I am always here. So I'm not my desires and fears. I'm not my intellect. I'm not my mind. Whether thoughts come and go in waking and dream, but they all disappear in sleep, but still I'm there. So we need to intellectually understand, but we are something distinct from all phenomena, from even the subtlest phenomena, from even the desires and fears which give rise to all other phenomena. Even those phenomena are other than myself. What I am the witness. I am that which is aware of all these things. Even that is not the ultimate truth, but we first need to separate ourselves from all phenomena. We need to recognize the distinction between ourselves as the subject and all objects. Objects are things that I'm aware of. I am the one who is aware of them. So the subject and object are two distinct things. We need to have that, we need to intellectually grasp, but we are something distinct from all phenomena. Once we grasp that, not by merely repeating it like a formula, but by actually understanding the reasons why, then we once we clearly understand that, then when we practice, we will not be mistaking. I mean, when we're trying to turn our attention within, so many thoughts arise. Thought means so many phenomena arise from within. Feelings and all sorts of things arise. Nothing that arises is I. Who am I? What is the place from which, what is that abiding source from which I rise as I? That is investigation. So first we need to first we hear the teachings. That's Sravana. You are not this body or mind, you are that. That is Sravana. Then we need to do the manana. Manana means thinking, why am I not this body? Why am I not this mind? Why am I that? We need to understand the reasons. Once we've understood the reason, we then understand, okay, if I am not this body or mind, I need to forget about them. I need to attend only to myself. That is the nididhyasana, is when our attention turns away from all phenomena, even the ideas that we've learned in all the, even the ideas that, even Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu we have to forget when we turn within. So long as we're thinking of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, our attention is on something else. So even the teachings need to be forgotten. Well, that is forgotten, not exactly forgotten. We need to, we shouldn't be constantly thinking over the teachings. Thinking over teachings is important to help us to understand, but we need to put the teachings into practice. Putting them into practice means turning our attention away from everything, including even what we've been taught. Who am I? That alone is the practice. Turning our attention back towards this I alone. That doesn't even mean asking the question, who am I? That's missing the point. Some people just say, oh, Bhagavan taught, who am I? Therefore I sit here, and they take who am I like a japa. Bhagavan says in Ekama Panchakam, those who repeat who am I and whence am I are just like a drunkard who is so drunk he doesn't know where he is and goes about saying who am I, in his intoxication saying who am I and whence am I. You know what Bhagavan is saying? They completely misunderstood the point. When he said investigate who am I, or investigate from where you arose as I, he's not telling us to repeat it. If I give you, here's a book, If I show you this book and say, investigate what's in it, if you hold the book in your hand and say, what is in this book, what is in this book, what is in this book, you're not going to learn anything. If you want to investigate what's in the book, you have to open the book and see what's inside. Likewise, when Bhagavan says, Bhagavan doesn't say, ask who am I, he says, investigate who am I. So we need to investigate what we actually are. That means we need to turn our attention back towards ourself alone. Try to attend to ourself alone. That alone is self-investigation. All these other things, we do need to understand that we're not this body. And but what we actually are is that. That means prajnanam Brahman. So it's prajnanam. What is prajnanam? Pure awareness. We are just pure awareness. What is pure awareness? It's not awareness of anything. It's awareness that is aware of nothing other than itself. That is pure awareness. That is what we actually are. So in order to experience ourselves as pure awareness, we need to attend to ourselves alone and be aware of nothing other than ourselves. That is the practice. That is what Bhagavan means by standing as that. In order to stand as that, we need to be aware of that alone. That means ourself alone, the pure awareness that we actually are. So we need to go very, very deep. Our manana needs to be deep, and our nididhyasana needs to be deep. And like Bhagavan said, like a pearl diver diving deep into the ocean, we need to, with vairagya, he defines in that paragraph of Nana as not attending to anything other than ourselves. That is vairagya. And with that stone of vairagya, we need to dive deep to find the pearl of Atman. In other words, we need to know ourselves by withdrawing our attention from all other things. Velividengale victu, manum tanoli uru ordale undipara, unme unichya mundipara. What is real awareness? Bhagavan says in Upadesha verse 16, Velividengale victu, giving up all external phenomena. That means ceasing to be aware of anything other than ourselves. Manam tanoli uru ordale, mind knowing its own form of light. That means attending only to the awareness that we actually are. That is the practice. That is
totally
alone will lead to pure, real awareness.
I totally understand the concept. If somebody wants to learn a bicycle, they have to start with a tricycle, so that until they are able to experience the ability to balance the wheel, two-wheel ride, they have to use the third wheel. But I'm not saying that they have to use the third wheel throughout their life as long as they're riding a bicycle. No, I'm not arguing on that one. The problem comes the pure Advaita, and particularly for philosophical discussion with those who have no faith in Advaita, when we say that the self-awareness is understandable theoretically, but once you say you are Godhood and you are Brahman and there's no God outside, then you don't have all the so-called attributes given to God. As I mentioned, at least a couple of them, that is limitlessness and all-pervasive and all-powerful. All those things, none of us have it. So the difficulty comes in convincing oneself, I don't have all those powers. How can I believe that I am God or I am Brahma? But until one experiences the benefits of realizing that one is not the body, one is awareness, pure awareness, I think there's nothing wrong in practicing that I am not that, I am that, I am not the body. That's my just, at least for beginners, or at least in the journey, in the earlier part of the journey, it is essential.
Well, I think part of the reason why we are told you are that, we have so many ideas about God. God is all powerful, all knowing, all loving. God is all pervasive, this, that. We've got so many concepts about God. But by all these concepts don't help us to know God as he actually is. All we need to know about God is one thing. You are that. Forget all the other things we've learned about God. All we need to know is God is what is shining in me as I. forget every other idea we've learned about God, because they're just theoretical ideas. In fact, the reason why it is said you are that is trying to turn our attention away from all these ideas we have about God to know ourselves. There is no God other than yourself. That is the truth. But because we feel ourselves to be very small, we think God is very big, very something far away, distant. So many ideas we cannot know God, but by theology. But if you want to learn God, to know God, first thing, don't study theology. Because if you study theology, you'll get so many ideas about God, so many contradictory ideas. For example, most religions say God is infinite, but they say God is other than you. That is a contradiction. Because if God is other than you, then you're limiting him. He's finite. Once a Christian missionary came to Bhagavan and said, "Isn't it sacrilege to say I am God?" Bhagavan replied, "Isn't it sacrilege to say I am other than God? Because if you say I am other than God, you're limiting God. Because if you are something separate from God, God isn't infinite." So theology, it's just a whole set of concepts. It may be useful at a certain stage of spiritual development, but when we come to Bhagavan, we are no longer in kindergarten standard. Bhagavan is teaching us PhD standard. In fact, postdoctoral standard he's teaching us. So we're now studying on our postdoctoral studies. So what we learned in kindergarten, most of it no longer applies. So we have to, we are doing research. We're doing our postdoctoral research. We have to leave aside all the theories, concentrate on the practice. What is the practice? Knowing who am I. When in Maharshi's Gospel or somewhere, someone asked Bhagavan, I'm a helpless creature, will not God help me? Bhagavan said, if you believe God will help you, surrender yourself to him. If you have doubts about whether God will surrender, leave God to take care of himself. You know yourself. So we burden our, Bhagavan's teachings are asking us to question all our most fundamental beliefs. So we need to be ready to jettison all our old ideas. There is no God other than you. You are that. Know yourself and you know God.
Thank you.
Yeah. And another thing, you used a nice analogy. You talked about a tricycle. So long as you're riding a three-wheel cycle, you cannot learn to ride a cycle. Sooner or later, you have to drop the third wheel. You have to ride on a two-wheel cycle. Then only you learn how to cycle. In Western countries, children start off with little tricycles, and then a bicycle with an extra wheel on the side, and then a bigger bicycle and a bigger bicycle. In India, in all the 20 years I was in India, maybe now they have tricycles, but now when I was there, I never saw a tricycle in all the time I was in India. I never saw a cycle with an extra wheel. I never even saw a children's cycle. Even little children, how they learn to ride a cycle, they learn monkey style. They put one leg in underneath the bar and they pedal. They learned how to do it. That is proper nididhyasana. Relying on tricycles is like relying on I am not this body, I am that Brahman. So long as we're thinking I am not this body, I am Brahman, we will never learn how to abide as that. To abide as that, we need to turn our attention within. So long as we depend on that third wheel, so long as we depend on any aid, we will not learn what is actually required, which is just to attend to ourselves. So when Bhagavan says this is a nal tuṇai-y-ē, this is just a good aid, it's just like the third wheel. So long as you're relying on the third wheel, you will not learn how to cycle. You've got to ditch the third wheel, then only you learn to balance on two wheels.
So, so Michael, you mentioned tuṇai, right?
Yes.
So Bhagavan says this, is possibly an aid. But in your opinion, what is the best tonight for practice of Atma-vichara?
Best aid?
Best aid.
I would say thinking deeply about Bhagavan's teachings, thinking why Bhagavan taught what he taught. Why did Bhagavan teach that this world is a dream? What is the reason? Why should we suppose that this world, Bhagavan says this world is a dream, which is contrary to what we all naturally believe. We all believe this world exists independent of our perception of it. So why should we believe Bhagavan when he says it's a dream? We have to think of the reasons why. There's a very good reason, because though we all assume this world exists when we don't perceive it, we have absolutely no evidence that the world exists. We say, oh, when I was sleeping, my friends were awake, and my friends told me the world continued to exist. But they didn't tell you in your sleep, they only told you when you were awake. So we actually have no evidence that anything exists independent of our perception of it. So we need to think very deeply. We need to question all our preconceived ideas and assumptions in order to understand why Bhagavan taught what he taught. Because only when we thought it through ourselves, when we understand all the logical connections between all the what Bhagavan taught us, it's all actually very, very simple. It's all logically coherent. That's all connected together. Every principle of Bhagavan's teachings entails every other principle. So we need to understand not just what Bhagavan taught, but why he taught it. What are the reasons for him saying the world is a dream? What are the reasons why he said this body is? Reason means, I'm not saying purpose, but I mean, what logical reason do we have for concluding I am not this body? Simply saying I am not this body, I could be sitting there saying I'm not a poor man. I'm the Tsar of Russia. By thinking that, I don't become the Tsar of Russia. I continue to be a pauper. So merely repeating something doesn't enable you to experience that. If I want to experience myself as the Tsar of Russia, I need to go to Russia, gain power, establish a government, and then only I become the Tsar of Russia. So merely thinking, I am not this body, I am Brahman, is not the way to become Brahman. Bhagavan says you are always Brahman. You are never anything other than Brahman. All you need to do is to know what you actually are. To know what you actually are, simply thinking, I am not this body, I am Brahman, isn't going to enable you to know what you actually are. Because the I that is thinking, I am not this body, I am Brahman, is ego, whose very nature is this Dehatma Buddhi. This awareness of itself as the ego is by its very nature aware of itself as a body. So as long as the ego is thinking I am Brahman, it's confusing this little person that it mistakes itself to be with Brahman. When Bhagavan says it's an aid, he says that as a concession. Yes, it's an aid because if you have understood this properly, when you remember, oh, I'm not this body, I'm Brahman, what should you do? What am I? Investigate who you are.
So, so the best aid is to read Bhagavan's original, one of his original words.
And to think deeply about them.
Reflect on it and slowly get practice.
In Vivekanchudamani, Shankara says, so I can't remember the exact numbers, but something like 1,000 times better than Sravana is Manana, and 100,000 times better than Manana is Nididhyasana. So there are many people, so many people in India know Advaita philosophy. They've learnt it because it's just part of their upbringing. So they know something, but they also mix it up with, they've also learned a little bit about yoga and about Sankhya and everything. So they mix all these things together and have just got a confused understanding. But that is the result of mere sravana without any manana. Manana means we need to think deeply about it. We need to understand the logical reasons for what we have been taught. We need to make the logical connections, understand it, because that is the way to get a deep conviction. By merely learning something by heart, you don't get a strong conviction. You have to understand the logical reasons for it. Once you've understood that, that is a great aid to the practice, because once we clearly understand that I am not anything that appears, I'm not any phenomenon, then only you know what you shouldn't. First, we need to know what we shouldn't attend to before we can find what we should attend to. So neti is necessary as an intellectual process in order to understand that what we need to investigate is only ourselves, the witness, that which is aware of all this. That to whom, Bhagavan asks often, to whom did this appear? To whom did this thought appear? Who is the one who is aware of it? So we need to turn our attention away from all phenomena to the one to whom phenomena appear. So the manana is very, very important. I think, in my experience, that is the best aid. But manana doesn't, Bhagavan's teaching, people often think that the bhakti aspect and the jnana aspect are two different things. Bhagavan offered two alternatives: either investigate yourself or surrender yourself. Sometimes Bhagavan even said that there are only two ways, but those two ways are actually only one. So we need to understand also the bhakti element of this path, because when we actually come to practice, what we all find is, when I try to attend to myself, my attention keeps on jumping out towards other things. Why does it jump out towards other things? Because I have more interest in other things than I have in knowing myself. If I sit down to meditate and then begin thinking about what meeting I've got tomorrow, or what I've got to do, or how I'm going to pay my bills, or this or that, that means you've got more interest in those other things you're thinking about than in what you're sat down to do. So this is where the bhakti element is absolutely essential. We attend to things other than ourselves because of our desires and attachments. So until our love to know ourselves is stronger than our desire and attachment for anything else, we will not succeed. So to understand the role that love plays in this path is also very important. So all of Bhagavan's teachings, whether it's Arunachal Stuti Panchakam or Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu or Nāṇa, or whatever it is, they're all connected. They all have one single aim. Arunachala mena ahameine pava ahateva arupaya Arunachala. The sole purpose of Arunachala is annihilation of the ego. Bhagavan says in the very first verse of Arunachala life, those who think that first verse can have two meanings. Arunachala mena ahame can mean who think that Arunachala alone is I. That's one meaning. Or who think of Arunachala within the heart. Both actually amount to the same thing, because within the heart, what is there? There's only I. Thoughts are outside. What is within is only I. So everything, all of Bhagavan's teachings are connected. So thinking deeply about all his teachings, understanding the connection between all these disparate elements of his teachings and seeing how they're all intimately connected, that is the greatest aid to the practice of this path. That will help us to surrender ourselves, that will help us to investigate ourselves. Because self-investigation and self-surrender are just two sides of the same coin.
One leads to the other.
Well, yeah, in a sense, that is ultimately we cannot surrender ourselves without investigating ourselves, because the very nature of ego is to rise and flourish by attending to things other than itself. So in order to surrender itself, it needs to attend to itself alone. So ultimately, surrender can be completed only by self-investigation. But even before we start self-investigation, we can begin curbing our desires and attachments. That's what all the other earlier practices of bhakti are. We develop love for God in order to reduce our desires and attachments for other things. We want God for God's sake alone. So you can surrender partially without self-investigation, but you cannot complete your surrender without self-investigation. And you cannot even begin to investigate yourself without surrendering. To at least to the extent we investigate ourselves, to that extent we are surrendering. Because instead of attending to anything else, we're attending to ourselves. So we have to give up our desire and attachment for everything else in order to investigate ourselves. So the self-investigation is the last, that is, all bhakti practices lead to self-surrender. And all practices of self-surrender lead ultimately to vichara. Vichara is the culmination of the path of surrender, which is the culmination of the path of bhakti. So this is the path of the highest path of bhakti.
It's mutually supportive.
Bhava Balatinal, Bhagavan says in verse 9, that Bhava he's referring to is the Ananya Bhava he referred to in the previous verse. Ananya Bhava means meditating on what is not other than oneself. In other words, meditating on oneself alone. By the strength of that Bhava, that self-attentiveness, Anya Bhava Balatinal, Bhavanatita Satbhava Tirutale, being in Satbhava, being in one's real being, the state of being, which is beyond Bhavana, Bhavanatita, that's beyond all meditation, beyond meditation. Bhavana there means attending to anything other than ourselves. So the being in that state of being, which is beyond Bhavana, Parabhakti Tattva, that is the supreme bhakti. So this self-investigation, this is the highest bhakti. In another verse, Bhagavan says, Atmanusantana. Atmanusantana means self-investigation. Aktu Paramisa Bhakti. That is the supreme devotion to God, because God exists as oneself. So thinking of all these teachings Bhagavan gives us, these are what greater aid can we have than Bhagavan's own words? But just when we read them, we need to read them very deeply, think very deeply about them. And then if we read properly, we should be doing manana while reading. And if we do manana properly, we should be doing the practice while doing manana, because what manana is constantly reminding of is I. That's why it's sometimes said some people attain, by a single word from a guru, they attain jnana. Why is that? Because that single word from a guru, because that is very rare, because those who are already have done all the practice which is necessary, that one word from a guru is enough for that final turn, 180-degree turn. To Tine Swami, Bhagavan just said Iru, be. And that one word be, and it was even in a completely different context. Tine Swami went to Bhagavan to say, Bhagavan, I'm going to Pondicherry because there's a job opportunity for me there. And Bhagavan said Iru, which for any onlooker will look like Bhagavan telling him to stay, which is unusual for Bhagavan. Bhagavan doesn't usually do that. But Iru has a much deeper meaning than just physically stay in Tirumala. It means stay in your own state, be as you are. So that one word, because of the maturity that was already there in Tine Swami, that one word was enough to turn his attention within, and the story was over for him.
Yeah. Tine Swami, by the way, Tine Swami's samadhi is by Sadhu's samadhi.
And that story of Bhagavan saying Iru to Tine Swami, I heard that from Sadhuam. I asked Sadhuam, were you there at the time? Sadhuam said, no, he wasn't there, but he heard it from Murugan. And Sadhuam told me there would have been many people present in the hall at that time, but apart from Bhagavan and Tinai Swami, Murugan was the only person who understood what happened at that moment.
Wow.
So the real reason why Bhagavan said Iru and how the effect that had on Tinai Swami, that was known only to Murugan, Bhagavan and Tinai Swami, who are one and the same because they all have merged in the source.
Because it was so unusual for Bhagavan. Bhagavan is not going to tell anybody to stay here or go there.
Yeah.
So probably Murunar was the only one who got the message, you know, the meaning of it. You know?
Like when Bhagavan said to Sadhuam, Bande Velepa, attend to that for which you came. Generally, when Bhagavan said Bande Velepa, he said in a particular context. If people came and started complaining about the ashram management or about this wasn't right or that wasn't right, or complaining about some other devotee who they thought wasn't behaving properly or anything, Bhagavan would ask, is this what you've come here for? Bande Velepa, attend to that for which you've come. But in the case of Sadhuam, it was quite different. Shall I tell that story? That
go ahead. Yeah.
One morning, Sadhuam had he had got up early, so he was sitting on the foot of the hill, writing a song of prayer to Bhagavan, and he suddenly noticed that the time seemed to have passed, and so he thought, oh, maybe he'll be late for breakfast. So he hurriedly came down the hill to a dining hall, but he saw people were already coming out. So he thought, okay, I've missed breakfast today. So he was about to go and sit, thinking Bhagavan will come out soon. He was about to go to the hall to sit down and wait for Bhagavan to come so that he could give his song. But someone spotted him and said, oh, Bhagavan was asking about you, go in. So he went into the dining hall, and most people had stood up by that time. Seeing him, Bhagavan indicated to one of the people who was serving food to place a leaf plate just in front of him. So Sadhuam sat down and idli was served. He began to eat. He hesitated. Then Bhagavan said, eat. So he began to eat. Then Bhagavan stood up. So Sadhuam stood up because he didn't want to remain sitting when Bhagavan is standing. Bhagavan said to him, Bande Velepa, attend to that for which you've come. That means eat your idlis. Superficially, it means eat your idlis. So Sadhuam sat down, but then he hesitated because it's a custom in South India. If you're eating a meal, if you stand up, you shouldn't sit down and continue eating. So Bhagavan by that time had stood up and was just passing him. And seeing him hesitating, Bhagavan said again, Vande Velepa. So he then thought Bhagavan was telling him to eat idli. He began to eat. Bhagavan went behind him and was going out the door behind, and that's just where Bhagavan sits used to sit in the dining hall. Nowadays or when I was there, they used to open only the door to the left of Bhagavan, the door near the well. But in those days, they used to open the door directly ahead of Bhagavan. So he was going to go to that door directly ahead of him. So when Bhagavan passed and was going that way, Sadhuam turned round and looked, just as Bhagavan was stepping over the threshold. Bhagavan turned round again and said, Vande Velepa, third time. Then Sadhuam understood, oh, Bhagavan isn't just talking about idlis, he's talking about what is the purpose for which you've come to the world, you attend to that. So that instruction had a very deep impact on him. So often Bhagavan will say things that will, in another context, it would be taken as having a different meaning, or superficially it will be taken as having a different meaning. Actually, it has a very different meaning. So when Bhagavan said to Tinai Swami Iru, he wasn't just telling him, stay, don't go to Padacchēdam. He was saying, stay, don't rise as ego.
I think that applies to all of us.
Yes. But
don't want to waste time.
But that one word, it has an effect. It had an effect because of the maturity that was already there. But whatever be the word coming from Guru, The purpose of it is to turn our attention towards ourselves. It's not the word that creates vijnana, it's the word turns the attention within. That turning of the attention is within is what gives rise to vijnana. Yes.
Okay, let me see.
A new question.
I know, which so many things happened. Okay, when you're talking about phenomenon, the rise of phenomenon, and then the so are you saying phenomenon and awareness are mutually exclusive? Like, for instance, when the movie is playing right now, the screen becomes the movie, right? Like, I see Michael on the screen and all of that. So I'm not able to tease out the screen, like, you know, that they're so enmeshed that I'm not able to tease out distinctly, okay, this is the screen, this is the image. So when phenomenon arise, it's awareness plus the experience of phenomenon that I'm not able to separate, okay, who's the awareness here and which part is the experience?
Okay. A term Bhagavan often used when referring to phenomena was form, uru.
Form?
Form. For example, he says, grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on form, it flourishes, referring to the ego. Form there means any kind of phenomena, whether seemingly physical phenomena or seemingly mental phenomena. All phenomena are forms. But awareness is formless. So the nature of awareness is to be devoid of form. The nature of form is to be non-aware. Forms are not aware. Ego is the link between the two. Ego is chit jada granti. Chit means awareness. Jada means non-aware, is referring to a form. Granti means the not. When awareness seemingly becomes entangled with form, that is ego. Actually, form doesn't exist independent of ego. Ego rises, immediately projects the form as itself, because ego cannot rise without being aware of itself as a body. So it projects and experiences a body as itself, and thereby it projects all other forms. So forms, but ego is not real. The ego is a form of awareness, but it's not real awareness. Real awareness is only pure awareness. In the view of pure awareness, there are no forms, there are no phenomena. So phenomena and real awareness are totally unlike in nature, because pure awareness is ever devoid of form, and that form is ever devoid of awareness. Form comes into existence when we rise as ego. We rise as ego by projecting a form and taking it to be ourselves. So ego is neither this nor that. Bhagavan says in verse 24 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, this Jada uḍal nāṇmaṇidā, the insentient body, the non-aware body, does not say I. Satchit uḍļadu, the real awareness, Satchit, does not rise. But between these two rises some spurious entity, raises an I, which to the measure of the body. That ego is a form of awareness, but it's limited itself to a body. So it's neither the real awareness, nor is it the body. Something, when he says it, ideo means in between. Obviously, there's not awareness on one side and form on the other side, and ego rises in between. This is a metaphorical way of saying it. What in between means here is, for example, supposing you've read a story in the newspaper and you ask me if it's true or false. I'll say it's neither true nor false, somewhere in between. What does that mean? It's got some elements of truth in it. It's got some elements of fiction in it. It's a mixture. So in that sense, ego is neither awareness, the pure awareness, nor is it a form. It's something in between. It's taken elements of both, but it's actually neither. But so form exists only in the view of ourself as ego. Only when we rise as ego does form seem to exist. In sleep, we are not aware of any phenomena. Only when we rise as ego in waking and dream, phenomena seem to exist.
So when the form exists, does that pure awareness exist also?
Yes. Yes.
Pure awareness is, Bhagavan gave an analogy. Pure awareness is the screen. Phenomena or forms are just the pictures on the screen.
So when the picture appears, does the screen become the picture?
No, the picture is untouched. Bhagavan used to say, if there's a film of a fire showing on the screen doesn't get burned. If there's a film of a flood, the screen doesn't become wet. The screen is untouched by whatever appears on it.
So the screen
is just
is
an appearance.
Right, right.
Poitotrum, as Bhagavan used to say, a false appearance, unreal appearance.
It's unreal, even though it's appearing from the real, it's unreal.
It's not appearing from the unreal. It's appearing. It's not appearing from the real. It's appearing from the unreal. What appears from the real is ego, but ego is not real. It's unreal. From ego, everything else appears. So all phenomena appear from the unreal ego, which appears from what is real, which is pure awareness. Ego is neither real nor unreal. It's in between. But that's very important because though ego itself as ego, it's unreal, but it has an element of reality in it. What is real in ego is only the awareness. So if we separate ego from all phenomena, what remains is only awareness. There is no ego. If you untangle the knot, you separate the two pieces of string, which were previously tangled, you've no longer got a knot. But in this case, once you've untangled the knot, so you no longer have a knot, then you've only got not two pieces of string, but one piece of string, because the second piece of string came into existence only because of the knot. We can't stretch the analogies too far, but the phenomena exist only because we have risen as ego, because they exist only in the view of ourself as ego. That's why Bhagavan says in verse 4 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, Uruvam Tānayin, Uļļu Paramatran. I mean, if oneself is a form, or if we are a form, if oneself is a form, the world and God will be likewise. If one is not a form, who can see their forms and how? So it's only when we rise as ego, taking ourselves to be a body, but all other forms come into existence. And we say, this is world and that is God. And I want to renounce this world and know that God. Both world and God depend for their seeming existence on ego. That is God as something other than ourselves. What God really is nothing but our own real nature. But so long as we have separated ourselves from our real nature seems to be something other than ourselves.
So you talked about the true awareness, right? The awareness that is always there, and then the transitive awareness, which is what you're saying, that your question was that you're not able to tease out that intermittent awareness of phenomena from the real awareness. Is that right?
The real awareness is just aware. It's not aware of anything.
It's just aware.
In order to be aware of something, we need to be aware. But in order to be aware, we don't need to be aware of anything. In sleep, we are aware, but not aware of anything. So the real awareness is only that pure awareness. That is,
And I will know that.
We are always that, which is why Bhagavan ends this verse by saying, nāmaduveṉ niṛkum adaṉāl, because we, or eṇṇrum nāmaduveṉ niṛkum adaṉāl, because we always exist, we always stand as that. That is the implied meaning there.
And I will know that state. I mean, know means I won't know it as an object, but then I will become, or I am that. So, but then I experience it.
Yes, yes. But so as soon as you experience that, you cease to be the person or ego you see, but ego is, we exist as ego so long as we're aware of ourselves as a person. When we see ourselves as pure awareness, not only the person ceases to exist, the ego who said that person is I ceases to exist. So that is Grantibeda, that is the cutting of the knot.
Yet that is not a void, it is an experience. It's a live
Bhagavan said that in verse 12. It's parandru, it is not a void. It is purna, it is the wholeness, fullness. So it's the very opposite of a void. It is, from the perspective of ego, it seems to be void, because there's no phenomena.
Yeah.
So it's devoid. That's why Bhagavan starts at verse 12 by saying, that which is devoid, the awareness that is devoid of awareness and ignorance, is it real awareness? No, it's actually very simple. It sounds, when you first read it, it sounds something mysterious, but it's not actually. What he talks about as arivu ariyame there, the awareness or knowledge and ignorance, or awareness and ignorance, is awareness and ignorance of things other than ourselves. That which is devoid of that awareness of anything other than ourselves, that is real awareness. Yes. And that's such an important teaching that the only sentence which he almost verbatim repeats, both in Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, verse 12, and in verse 27 of Upadesha.
So அறிவறியாமை மற்ற அறிவே அறிவாகும் உண்மை உந்திப்பறார் அறிவதற்கு ஒன்றிலே உந்திப்பறார். So can you translate that for these people, please?
Yeah, in what Bhagavan said there, what he says in verse 27 is that the awareness that is devoid of awareness and ignorance alone is real awareness. This is idumme, this is the truth. Why? He gives a reason. Arivadaku ondrile undipara. There's nothing to know there. That is, in our real state, there is nothing to know. So in pure awareness, there's nothing else for it to know. It's only in the view of ego that there's something to know. So as ego, we can never be aware of pure awareness. But though we cannot be aware of pure awareness, we have to try to be aware of pure awareness. Because only by trying to be aware of pure awareness, as soon as ego sees itself as it actually is, as pure awareness, it ceases to be ego. That's why Bhagavan says in verse 16 that I was referring to earlier, verse 16 of Upadesha, Bhagavan says, giving up external phenomena, manum tan uḍal, the mind knowing its own form of light. That is unmei, that is real awareness. But how can the mind know its own form of light? As soon as the mind knows its own form of light, it ceases to be mind. So when the mind ceases to be mind, that is real awareness. So Bhagavan expresses these things so in such a beautiful manner, and also such a nuanced manner, and such a deep manner. But actually it's very, very simple. If we think about it carefully, what Bhagavan teaches us is extremely simple. The reason we have difficulty grasping what Bhagavan says, is twofold. Firstly, it's actually one reason. We are unwilling to let go of all our old beliefs. Sadhuam used to say, if you bring me a slate with lots of scribbling on it and ask me to write Bhagavan's name, first I'll wipe the slate screen and then I'll write Bhagavan's name. But if I wipe the slate screen and write Bhagavan's name, then you can see the beautiful name of Bhagavan. But without wiping the slate screen, if I write Ramana, it just becomes another scribbling among all the scribbling. So if we try to understand Bhagavan's teachings without giving up all our old beliefs, without jettisoning all our old ideas, we would just be, we won't get out of confusion. Bhagavan's teachings challenge us to question all our beliefs and all our assumptions. If we're willing to do so, if we're willing to question everything and reject whatever doesn't stand up to scrutiny, then we can understand Bhagavan's teaching, and then we can see how extremely simple Bhagavan's teachings are. But so long as we think, oh, the world exists there, I was born at such and such time, all these things, so long as we take all these things to be real, then Bhagavan's teaching is just scribbling on a well-scribbled slate. We first need to wipe out all these preconceived ideas and beliefs. But in order to wipe them out, we need to be willing to wipe them out. So long as I like all the scribblings on my slate, I'm not going to wipe them out. So that willingness is necessary. That is the bhakti element. That willingness to give up, to surrender everything, to give up all our old beliefs.
So we're not helpless. I mean, like, we are capable of wiping them out.
We are, yeah. We just need to be willing to question them. Now, for example, we take this world, we assume this world is real. But actually, what evidence do you have that you're not dreaming now? Whatever you experience now, you could equally well experience in a dream. So we have absolutely no evidence that we're not dreaming. So why should we assume that we're not dreaming? If we assume we are not dreaming, then we are assuming the existence of a world, we're assuming the existence of so many things. I don't know if you know about science, but in science, there's a philosophical principle which is considered as one of the guiding principles of science. That is, any phenomena, can be explained by many different theories. But in science, they always try to take the simplest theory. That's called Occam's razor, because there was a medieval Christian monk called William of Ockham. He was a philosopher, and he laid down this principle. It's called the principle of parsimony. You shouldn't multiply entities beyond necessity. In other words, you shouldn't assume the existence of anything that it's not necessary to assume the existence of. So if we assume the existence of the world, we are going against that principle of parsimony. So why should we complicate things by assuming a world is there? Those people who say that a world exists independent of our perception of it, the onus of proof is on them, but they can never prove it. Because there's no way we can prove anything exists but when we're not perceiving it. So actually, Bhagavan's teachings are hyper-rational. They're based on, we need to be willing to be skeptical about everything. Then only we can get faith in Bhagavan's teachings. So faith and skepticism, people generally think faith is opposed to skepticism and skepticism is opposed to faith. But in Bhagavan's teachings, both are necessary. We need to be skeptical about everything else in order to have faith in what Bhagavan taught us.
Fortunately for us now, even science proves that everything is an illusion. They're almost getting there now.
Science doesn't prove anything. So, it's a basic principle. In science, you can disprove things, but you cannot prove anything. So science works on constantly disproving old theories and then replacing with supposedly better theories. People talk about, they advertising this is a scientifically proven way to lose weight, or a scientifically proven way to improve your memory, or so many things are scientifically proven. But anyone who knows either science or philosophy properly knows there's no such thing as scientific proof. The only thing science can prove is what is untrue. It cannot prove what is true.
But step by step, when you unprove it, at some point you'll end up with Bhagavan's theory.
Well, when you get tired of constantly going outwards, you need to be fed up with science before you're ready for Bhagavan's teaching. Fed up with science means, obviously science has a purpose has mundane purpose. Because of science, now we're talking through the internet and everything. So science has its own place. And we should also listen to the scientists. When scientists say there's global warming going on, we shouldn't continue burning our fossil fuels like there's no tomorrow. So science has its own place in its own domain. It's perfectly applicable in its own domain. In the dream science is applicable. Bhagavan used to say, in a dream hunger is satisfied by dream food, or dream food satisfies dream hunger. So within the realm of this dream, science has its own place. It's perfectly fitting. But what science cannot tell us is what science can tell us all about the physical world. It cannot tell us anything metaphysical, because science is based on a metaphysical assumption that phenomena exist independent of our perception of them. It is based on the assumption that this world is not a dream. If this world is a dream, then all the science has, it's fine within the dream, but it doesn't tell us anything that's beyond the dream. So we can respect science in its own domain. The problem is many modern philosophers, they try to extend the implications of science beyond the realm of science. They try to make metaphysical assumptions based on science. But that's where they go wrong. Because in order to draw any metaphysical inference from science, you have to first make the metaphysical assumption that phenomena exist independent of our perception of them, which is something that we have no evidence for. The problem, the mischief mongers are not the scientists themselves, it's the philosophers who misuse science.